Sarah Mitchell had always been different from other tourists. While most visitors to Buckingham Palace were content to snap photos from behind the barriers and follow the designated paths, Sarah saw rules as mere suggestions. The 28-year-old travel blogger from California had built her entire career on pushing boundaries and getting the shots that others couldn't. Her Instagram account boasted over 2 million followers who loved her daring adventures and rule-breaking escapades around the world. On this particular Tuesday morning in September, London's autumn air carried a crisp promise of change. Sarah had arrived at Buckingham Palace just after dawn, armed with her professional camera equipment and an ambitious plan. She had spent weeks researching the palace grounds, studying guard rotations and identifying the perfect spots for her photo shoot. Her goal was simple yet audacious: capture intimate, behind-the-scenes footage of the royal guards that no other influencer had managed to obtain. The palace grounds were relatively quiet in the early morning hours, with only a handful of early tourists and the ever-present royal guards maintaining their stoic watch. Sarah positioned herself near the main gates, pretending to be just another tourist taking casual photos. But her keen eyes were studying every detail, every movement, every opportunity that might present itself. Guard James Harrison had been serving the Royal Guard for 8 years. At 34, he had seen every type of tourist imaginable, from the respectful visitors who maintained proper distance to the occasional troublemaker who thought the rules didn't apply to them. Something about the young woman with the expensive camera caught his attention immediately. There was a calculated intensity in her movements, a purposefulness that set her apart from typical tourists. As Sarah began moving closer to restricted areas, James noticed her pattern. She would take a few innocent photos, then gradually edge forward, testing boundaries. When other guards weren't looking, she would step over rope barriers and move into areas clearly marked as off-limits. Her movements were smooth and practiced, suggesting this wasn't her first time breaking protocol at a significant location. The first warning came when Sarah attempted to climb over a low barrier near the guard posts. James approached her with the standard diplomatic firmness that royal guards were trained to employ. His voice was calm but authoritative as he explained the boundaries and requested that she return to the designated tourist areas. Sarah flashed him a charming smile, apologized profusely, and appeared to comply. But James wasn't fooled. He had developed an instinct for troublemakers during his years of service, and this young woman set off every alarm bell in his experienced mind. He made a mental note to keep a close eye on her activities throughout the day. What he didn't know was that Sarah had recognized his vigilance and had already begun planning her next move. As the morning progressed and more tourists arrived, Sarah used the growing crowds as cover for her increasingly bold movements. She had identified several blind spots in the guard coverage and was systematically working her way closer to areas that would give her the exclusive content she craved. Her camera captured not just photos, but also detailed video footage of guard positions, rotation patterns, and security protocols. The tension between Sarah and James was building, though neither had spoken again since their first encounter. It was a silent game of cat and mouse, with Sarah pushing boundaries and James watching her every move. Other tourists remained oblivious to the brewing confrontation, focused on their own sightseeing experiences. By midday, Sarah had managed to access 3 different restricted areas, each time retreating when guards approached, but not before capturing the footage she wanted. Her boldness was escalating with each successful breach, and she was beginning to feel invincible. The content she was gathering would certainly go viral and cement her reputation as the influencer who could get access anywhere. James, meanwhile, was growing increasingly frustrated with the cat-and-mouse game. He had warned her multiple times through gestures and stern looks, but she continued to push forward. His training emphasized de-escalation and diplomacy, but this situation was testing his patience and professional restraint. He knew that if he didn't take more decisive action soon, this tourist's behavior could escalate into a serious security incident. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change both of their lives forever. Sarah's determination to capture exclusive content was on a collision course with James's duty to protect the royal premises. Neither could back down from their position, and both were about to discover that some lines once crossed cannot be uncrossed. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen across the palace grounds, the tension reached a breaking point. Sarah had identified her ultimate target, a restricted area near the private royal quarters where she believed she could capture unprecedented footage. James had positioned himself strategically, knowing that her pattern of behavior was leading to this moment. What happened next would be captured not just by Sarah's camera, but by multiple security cameras and witnesses, creating a record that would soon spread across the internet and change everything. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Sarah made her move toward the most restricted section of the grounds. She had waited for the perfect moment when tour groups created natural distractions, and guard attention was divided among multiple areas. Her heart raced with excitement as she approached the ornate gates that separated the public areas from the private royal quarters. James had anticipated this moment. Throughout the morning, he had observed Sarah's systematic approach to boundary testing, and her pattern told him exactly where she would make her final, most audacious attempt. He had quietly alerted his fellow guards through their discreet communication system, ensuring that backup would be available if needed. However, he hoped that one final, firm warning would be enough to deter her from what could become a serious security breach. As Sarah ducked under a clearly marked barrier and began setting up her camera equipment in the forbidden zone, James approached with measured steps. His military bearing was unmistakable as he closed the distance between them. This time there would be no polite suggestions or gentle redirection. The situation had escalated beyond the point of diplomatic courtesy. Sarah saw him coming but didn't retreat. Instead, she began filming, capturing James's approach and her own defiant stance. In her mind, this confrontation would make perfect content for her social media channels. The dramatic tension, the stern royal guard, her brave stand for getting the perfect shot. It was exactly the kind of viral content that had built her career. She had no idea that her decision to continue filming would soon become the most consequential mistake of her life. James stopped directly in front of her, his imposing figure blocking her path deeper into the restricted area. His voice carried the full weight of his authority as he delivered what would be his final warning. He explained clearly that she was in violation of multiple security protocols, that she was trespassing on royal property, and that she needed to cease filming immediately and return to the public areas. But Sarah's response shocked even the experienced guard. Instead of compliance or even argument, she laughed. She actually laughed at his warning, waving her camera dismissively and informing him that she was a professional content creator with millions of followers. She suggested that he should be grateful for the exposure she was bringing to the palace and that her documentation of the guards' work was actually a service to the royal family. The audacity of her response left James momentarily speechless. In 8 years of service, he had never encountered such blatant disrespect for royal protocol and security measures. But what happened next would define both of their futures. As Sarah turned away from him and began walking deeper into the restricted area, continuing to film despite his explicit warnings, James made a decision that would soon be analyzed by millions of viewers around the world. Unknown to both Sarah and James, their entire interaction was being captured by multiple palace security cameras. Additionally, several tourists in the distance had noticed the commotion and had begun recording on their own phones. The scene was being documented from multiple angles, creating a comprehensive record of everything that was about to unfold. Sarah's confidence reached dangerous levels as she ventured further into areas that no unauthorized person should ever access. She was now filming areas that contained sensitive security information, recording guard positions and protocols that were meant to remain confidential. Her social media mindset had completely overridden any consideration for the serious nature of her actions. James followed her, his training kicking in as he assessed the escalating situation. This was no longer about an overeager tourist taking inappropriate photos. Sarah's actions now constituted a legitimate security threat, and his response would need to reflect the seriousness of her breach. He activated his emergency communication device, alerting palace security to the situation while maintaining visual contact with the intruder. The transformation in James's demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. The diplomatic guard had shifted into security threat response mode. His movements became more purposeful, his positioning more strategic. Sarah, still focused on capturing her footage, failed to recognize the change in the situation's dynamic. She continued to treat the incident as content creation rather than the serious security breach it had become. As backup guards began moving into position around the restricted area, Sarah finally began to sense that her adventure was taking an unexpected turn. The earlier playful cat-and-mouse game had evolved into something much more serious. But rather than retreating, her content creator instincts doubled down. She began narrating for her camera, describing the overreaction of the palace, security, and positioning herself as a victim of overzealous authority. What she didn't realize was that her own filming was providing the evidence that would soon be used against her. Every word, every action, every moment of defiance was being recorded not just by her own camera, but by the sophisticated security system that protected one of the world's most important royal residences. The stage was set for James's next move, a decision that would be viewed and analyzed by millions of people around the world. The consequences of that moment would extend far beyond the palace grounds, affecting both of their lives in ways that neither could have imagined when the day began. The moment that would change everything happened at exactly 2:47 p.m., according to the timestamp on the security footage that would later be analyzed frame by millions of viewers. Sarah had pushed deeper into the restricted area, now dangerously close to access points that led directly to the royal family's private quarters. Her camera continued recording as she provided running commentary about the excessive security measures and her right as a journalist to document the truth. James had reached his breaking point. His training, his duty, and his oath to protect the royal family all converged into a single moment of decision. As Sarah approached a doorway that was absolutely forbidden to unauthorized personnel, James moved with the swift precision that 8 years of royal guard service had ingrained in him. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms, news channels, and analysis shows around the world. In one fluid motion, James stepped forward and physically intercepted Sarah's advance. His movement was controlled, professional, and completely within his authority as a royal guard dealing with a security threat. However, Sarah's reaction was anything but controlled. Caught off guard by the physical intervention, she stumbled backward, her expensive camera equipment clattering to the ground as she lost her balance. The sound of the camera hitting the stone pavement echoed across the courtyard, drawing the attention of tourists and guards alike. Sarah's shocked expression quickly transformed into outrage as she realized what had happened. But instead of recognizing the seriousness of her situation, she immediately began shouting about assault, about her rights, and about the international incident she claimed was being created. James remained calm and professional throughout her outburst, but his actions had been captured from multiple angles. The palace security cameras had recorded the entire sequence, showing clearly that his intervention was measured and appropriate given the security threat Sarah represented. However, other tourists' phone cameras had captured fragments of the interaction from different perspectives, and these partial views would soon create a very different narrative on social media. Within minutes of the incident, the first video clips began appearing online. A tourist from Germany had captured the moment when James stepped forward. But her video began just seconds before the physical contact, missing the crucial context of Sarah's repeated warnings and unauthorized access to restricted areas. Another tourist's video caught Sarah's dramatic fall and her angry reaction, but not the security breach that had prompted James's response. Sarah herself, despite her equipment being damaged, managed to retrieve her camera's memory card. Even as palace security personnel surrounded her and began the process of removing her from the premises, she was already planning how to present her story to her millions of followers. In her mind, she had just captured the perfect victim narrative that would generate massive engagement and sympathy. The response from other guards was swift and professional. Sarah found herself surrounded by 4 additional security personnel, who formed a protective barrier around both her and James while they assessed the situation. Standard protocol required that any physical intervention be thoroughly documented and reviewed, which meant that everyone involved would need to provide detailed statements about the incident. As Sarah was escorted toward the palace security office, she continued to protest loudly, ensuring that her voice carried to the growing crowd of onlookers. Several tourists continued filming, creating multiple perspectives of her removal from the premises. Her strategy was clear: make the incident as public and dramatic as possible to support her eventual claim of mistreatment. James, meanwhile, faced an immediate review of his actions by his supervising officers. Palace security took any physical intervention seriously, regardless of the circumstances. However, the comprehensive security footage clearly showed the progression of events, from Sarah's initial boundary violations through her repeated ignoring of warnings to her final approach to highly sensitive areas. The irony of the situation was not lost on the security team. Sarah's own insistence on filming everything had provided the most complete record of her rule violations and the justification for James's response. Her camera had captured her own dismissive attitude toward security warnings, her deliberate trespassing, and her continued advancement toward restricted areas despite clear instructions to stop. Within hours, the first news reports began appearing online. Social media algorithms, designed to promote engaging content, rapidly amplified the most dramatic versions of the story. Sarah's edited footage, which portrayed her as a victim of aggressive security tactics, began spreading faster than the complete security camera footage that showed the full context of events. The palace press office found itself dealing with an unexpected crisis. Initial media inquiries focused on whether the royal guard's response had been appropriate and whether palace security was unnecessarily harsh with tourists. The full story, with its complete context and security implications, would take much longer to emerge than the viral snippets that were already shaping public opinion. By evening, hashtags related to the incident were trending across multiple platforms. Sarah, despite being banned from the palace grounds and facing potential legal consequences, had achieved exactly what she had set out to accomplish: massive viral attention for her content. However, the price of that attention was about to prove much higher than she had anticipated. The viral explosion began within 6 hours of the incident. Sarah's carefully edited video, posted from her hotel room that evening, presented a narrative of innocent tourism interrupted by aggressive security overreach. Her version of events, titled "Attacked by Royal Guard for Taking Photos," garnered over 2 million views in its first 12 hours online. The comments section filled with outraged supporters denouncing the treatment of American tourists and calling for boycotts of British tourism. But Sarah had made a crucial miscalculation. In her rush to control the narrative, she had underestimated both the thoroughness of palace security documentation and the speed with which official responses could be mobilized in the digital age. While her edited clips spread across TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, a very different story was emerging in the offices of Buckingham Palace and the Metropolitan Police. Detective Inspector Margaret Chen of the Metropolitan Police had been assigned to review the incident within hours of its occurrence. Her investigation revealed a pattern of behavior that went far beyond simple tourist enthusiasm. Sarah's social media history showed a consistent pattern of deliberately violating rules and boundaries at significant locations around the world. From climbing restricted areas at the Colosseum to ignoring safety barriers at Niagara Falls, her content strategy relied heavily on breaking rules for dramatic effect. The complete palace security footage painted a damning picture of Sarah's actions. The cameras had captured her systematic testing of boundaries throughout the morning, her dismissive response to multiple warnings, and her deliberate advance into areas containing sensitive security information. Most significantly, the footage showed her filming guard positions, rotation patterns, and access points that were considered classified security details. James Harrison found himself at the center of an international media storm. Initial reports portrayed him as either a hero protecting royal security or a villain attacking an innocent tourist, depending on which version of events different outlets chose to emphasize. The pressure was immense, but his years of training had prepared him for scrutiny. More importantly, he knew that the complete security footage would vindicate his actions once it was properly reviewed. The royal press office, initially caught off guard by the viral nature of the story, began a careful but firm response strategy. They could not immediately release the complete security footage due to ongoing police investigations and security protocols. However, they began providing context to major news outlets about the seriousness of Sarah's security violations and the appropriate nature of the guard's response. Sarah's legal troubles began escalating rapidly. The initial charges of trespassing and disturbing the peace were compounded by more serious allegations related to filming in restricted security areas. British terrorism prevention laws included specific provisions about documenting security measures at protected government facilities, and Sarah's footage clearly violated several of these statutes. Her attempts to maintain public sympathy became increasingly difficult as more details emerged. Other tourists who had witnessed her behavior throughout the day began coming forward with their own footage and testimonies. These accounts consistently described Sarah as dismissive of rules, argumentative with staff, and deliberately provocative in her actions long before the final confrontation. With James, the social media narrative began shifting as investigative journalists started examining Sarah's history more closely. Her previous incidents at international landmarks revealed a pattern of behavior that contradicted her claims of innocent tourism. Travel bloggers and security experts began analyzing her techniques and explaining how her actions could genuinely compromise safety and security at the locations she visited. James received unexpected support from an international community of security professionals who understood the impossible position that viral social media could create for law enforcement and security personnel. Former Royal Guards, police officers, and military personnel shared their own experiences with individuals who deliberately provoked confrontations for social media content. The palace's measured response proved more effective than aggressive counterattacks might have been. By providing factual information without engaging in personal attacks on Sarah, they maintained the dignity associated with royal institutions while allowing the facts to speak for themselves. The complete security footage, when finally released through proper legal channels, provided undeniable evidence of the incident's true nature. Sarah's million-dollar social media empire began showing cracks as sponsors and partners started distancing themselves from the controversy. Brands that had previously paid premium rates for her promotional content began reconsidering their associations with someone who was now facing serious legal charges in a foreign country. The viral attention she had sought was proving to be a double-edged sword. Public opinion polls showed a dramatic shift as more information became available. Initial sympathy for Sarah as a victim of security overreach transformed into support for James and appreciation for the difficult job faced by security professionals. The complete story revealed the careful restraint James had shown throughout, the incident and the professionalism he had maintained, even under extreme provocation. The case became a teaching moment about the difference between the instant gratification of viral content and the slow, methodical process of establishing truth through proper investigation. Sarah's edited clips had created immediate emotional reactions, but the complete evidence painted a very different picture that would have lasting consequences for everyone involved. 3 weeks after the incident, the complete security footage was finally released to the public through official channels. The comprehensive video, lasting over 40 minutes, documented Sarah's entire day at the palace from multiple camera angles. The footage revealed details that completely contradicted her viral narrative and vindicated James's professional response to a genuine security threat. The released video showed Sarah's systematic approach to breaching security protocols. Viewers could see her testing boundaries, ignoring clearly posted signs, and deliberately moving into restricted areas despite multiple warnings from different guards throughout the day. Most damaging to her credibility was footage showing her laughing dismissively when James delivered his final warning, directly contradicting her claims of being an innocent, confused tourist. Sarah's legal situation deteriorated rapidly as the evidence mounted against her. The Crown Prosecution Service announced formal charges including trespass, breach of security regulations, and violation of terrorism prevention statutes related to filming restricted security installations. Her initial confidence about fighting the charges evaporated as her legal team explained the serious nature of the evidence against her and the potential consequences she faced. The international media coverage shifted dramatically once the complete footage became available. News outlets that had initially portrayed Sarah sympathetically began issuing corrections and retractions. Major American television networks featured segments comparing Sarah's edited clips with the complete security footage, demonstrating how selective editing could create entirely false narratives about controversial incidents. James Harrison became an unlikely hero in law enforcement and security communities worldwide. His restraint, professionalism, and measured response under extreme provocation were held up as examples of proper security protocol execution. Police academies and security training programs began using the footage as a teaching tool for dealing with provocative individuals who deliberately create confrontational situations for social media content. Sarah's social media empire collapsed with shocking speed. Her follower count plummeted as the truth about her actions spread. Sponsors canceled contracts, partnership deals were terminated, and platforms began reducing the visibility of her content due to community guidelines violations. The million-dollar income she had built through boundary-pushing content disappeared almost overnight. The psychological impact on Sarah was severe. Accustomed to being praised for her bold adventures and rule-breaking content, she struggled to cope with the international criticism and legal consequences. Her attempts to maintain her victim narrative became increasingly desperate as more evidence emerged contradicting her version of events. Mental health professionals who analyzed her public statements noted classic signs of someone struggling to reconcile their self-image with reality. Meanwhile, James received recognition from unexpected quarters. The royal family, through official channels, expressed appreciation for his dedication and professionalism. International security organizations invited him to speak about dealing with social media-driven security threats. His calm demeanor and measured responses during interviews contrasted sharply with Sarah's increasingly erratic public statements. The broader implications of the case began resonating throughout the tourism and social media industries. Tourist attractions worldwide implemented stricter policies about filming in restricted areas, and many locations increased security measures specifically to deal with social media influencers seeking controversial content. The incident became a case study in how viral content could create security vulnerabilities at sensitive locations. Sarah's legal team advised her to accept a plea agreement that would avoid prison time in exchange for substantial fines, community service, and a permanent ban from all royal properties. The alternative was a trial that would likely result in more severe penalties, given the overwhelming evidence against her. Faced with the possibility of years in prison, Sarah reluctantly agreed to the plea deal. The court proceedings revealed additional details about Sarah's methods and motivations. Expert testimony explained how her systematic approach to boundary violations demonstrated premeditation rather than spontaneous tourist enthusiasm. Security professionals testified about the genuine risks created by documenting and sharing sensitive security information, even inadvertently. James's testimony was measured and factual, focusing on his observations of Sarah's behavior and his decision-making process during the confrontation. His professional demeanor in court reinforced the public perception of him as a dedicated public servant who had performed his duties correctly under difficult circumstances. Cross-examination by Sarah's defense team only served to highlight his thorough training and appropriate response to the security threat. The sentencing hearing drew international attention as a test case for how social media-driven misconduct would be treated by traditional legal systems. Sarah's statement to the court, in which she finally acknowledged the seriousness of her actions and their potential consequences, marked the first time she had publicly accepted responsibility for the incident rather than blaming others for misunderstanding her intentions. The judge's comments during sentencing addressed the broader implications of the case for social media, culture, and personal responsibility. The ruling established important precedents about the legal consequences of creating content through deliberate rule violations, especially at locations involving national security considerations. 6 months after the incident, the long-term consequences for both Sarah and James had become clear, revealing how a single moment captured on camera could permanently alter two lives in completely different directions. The viral video that had initially seemed like Sarah's greatest triumph had instead become the catalyst for James's unexpected rise to international recognition and Sarah's dramatic fall from social media stardom. Sarah served her community service at a London homeless shelter, a requirement of her plea agreement that proved more transformative than anyone had anticipated. Working with individuals who had lost everything, including their homes and digital presence, gave her perspective on what truly mattered in life. The shelter's residents, many of whom had never heard of social media influencers, treated her as simply another volunteer, providing her first experience with anonymity in years. Her financial situation had become dire. Legal fees, fines, and the complete loss of her social media income had forced her to sell her California apartment and most of her possessions. The equipment and lifestyle that had defined her identity as a successful influencer were gone, replaced by uncertainty about her future and deep regret about the choices that had led to her downfall. James, meanwhile, had received a promotion within the Royal Guard, and had been invited to develop new training protocols for dealing with social media-related security incidents. His calm professionalism during the crisis had impressed his superiors and led to opportunities for advancement that would never have been available through normal channels. He had become the face of measured, appropriate response to provocation in the digital age. The documentary film rights to their story had been purchased by a major streaming platform, though both Sarah and James had refused to participate in the production. The film, titled Viral Truth, used their case to explore broader themes about social media culture, personal responsibility, and the gap between online personas and real-world consequences. Sarah found the renewed attention painful, while James viewed it as an opportunity to educate others about security challenges in the modern world. Sarah's attempts to rebuild her online presence had failed repeatedly. Her few remaining followers were mostly curiosity seekers rather than genuine fans, and any content she posted was immediately compared to her previous boundary-pushing style. Brands and sponsors who had once competed for her endorsement now avoided any association with her name. The incident had effectively ended her career as a professional influencer. The psychological counseling that was part of Sarah's court-ordered rehabilitation had helped her understand the addictive nature of social media validation and the dangerous escalation of risk-taking behavior that had characterized her content creation. For the first time, she began to see her actions at the palace not as bold journalism but as the culmination of years of increasingly reckless behavior, driven by the need for viral content. James had used his newfound platform to advocate for better understanding of the challenges faced by security professionals in the social media age. His speaking engagements at security conferences and law enforcement training programs had established him as an expert on managing provocative incidents while maintaining professional standards. He had turned his moment of crisis into a career-defining opportunity for positive impact. The relationship between Sarah and James remained complicated by the legal proceedings and media attention, but both had expressed mutual respect in their few public statements about each other. Sarah acknowledged that James had been doing his job appropriately, while James recognized that Sarah's actions, while inappropriate, had not been motivated by malicious intent toward the royal family. Sarah's family relationships had suffered significantly from the international scandal. Her parents, both retired teachers from a small California town, struggled to understand how their daughter's travel blog had led to criminal charges in a foreign country. The shame and embarrassment of having their family name associated with the incident had strained relationships that were only beginning to heal through family counseling. The broader impact on social media culture had been significant but mixed. Some influencers had become more cautious about boundary-pushing content, while others had attempted to recreate Sarah's viral success through similar provocative actions. The incident had sparked conversations about personal responsibility, the ethics of content creation, and the real-world consequences of online actions. James's personal life had improved dramatically. The respect he had earned through his handling of the crisis had enhanced his reputation both professionally and personally. He had begun a relationship with a fellow security professional who admired his principled approach to difficult situations. His future prospects, both within the Royal Guard and in the broader security industry, were brighter than ever. Sarah had begun working on a book about her experience, hoping to provide insights about the dangers of social media addiction and the importance of personal responsibility. Publishers had shown interest, recognizing the potential for her story to serve as both entertainment and cautionary tale. However, she was determined that any future projects would focus on helping others rather than glorifying her past behavior. The incident had become a case study in multiple academic fields, from media studies to criminal justice to psychology. Universities worldwide use the complete footage and subsequent developments to teach students about digital literacy, professional ethics, and the importance of understanding consequences before taking action in our interconnected world. 2 years after the incident that changed both their lives forever, Sarah Mitchell and James Harrison had evolved into completely different people from those captured in the viral video that had once dominated international headlines. The passage of time had provided perspective on their encounter and revealed the profound ways that a single moment of crisis could redirect entire life trajectories. Sarah had completed her community service and fulfilled all requirements of her legal settlement, but more importantly, she had undergone a fundamental transformation in her understanding of purpose and responsibility. Her work at the London homeless shelter had evolved from court-mandated service into a passionate advocacy role. She had been hired as a full-time coordinator for their digital literacy program, helping homeless individuals develop online skills for job searching and social services access. Her book, Behind the Filter, A Recovery from Social Media Addiction, had become a surprising bestseller, resonating with readers who recognized their own struggles with online validation and digital performance. The book's success came not from sensationalizing her palace incident, but from her honest examination of the psychological factors that had driven her increasingly reckless behavior and the difficult process of rebuilding her identity outside of social media metrics. James had been promoted to senior guard and had established the Royal Protection Service's first social media threat assessment unit. His expertise in managing provocative incidents while maintaining professionalism had made him a sought-after consultant for security services worldwide. He had developed training protocols that were now used by protection details for government officials, celebrities, and corporate executives who faced similar challenges from individuals seeking viral content. The documentary about their case had won several awards and had been used in educational programs about media literacy and digital citizenship. Both Sarah and James had eventually agreed to participate in a follow-up special that aired 2 years after the original incident, providing their perspectives on how the experience had changed their lives and their views on social media culture. Sarah's relationship with her family had been completely rebuilt through the shared experience of her rehabilitation and legal proceedings. Her parents had initially struggled to understand how their daughter had ended up in such serious trouble, but witnessing her genuine transformation and dedication to helping others had restored their pride in her character. The family had grown closer through adversity than they had been during her years of social media success. The financial consequences of Sarah's actions had been severe but manageable through her new career path and book royalties. She had chosen to live simply, focusing on work that provided personal satisfaction rather than material wealth. Her small London apartment was a stark contrast to the luxury lifestyle she had once maintained through social media income, but she had found greater contentment in her reduced circumstances. James had married his fellow security professional, and they had purchased a home in the London suburbs where they were raising their first child. His wife often remarked that the crisis had revealed James's character in ways that normal circumstances never could have demonstrated. The respect he had earned through his handling of the Sarah incident had enhanced every aspect of his personal and professional relationships. The broader impact of their story continued to influence social media culture and security protocols worldwide. Tourist attractions had implemented stricter policies about filming and content creation, while social media platforms had developed better mechanisms for identifying and reducing the spread of content created through rule violations or dangerous behavior. Sarah had been invited to speak at conferences and universities about social media addiction and the importance of authentic content creation. Her presentations, which included the complete security footage from her palace incident, provided powerful demonstrations of how the pursuit of viral content could lead to serious, real-world consequences. She had become an advocate for responsible social media use and digital wellness. The relationship between Sarah and James had evolved into mutual respect and occasional correspondence. They had appeared together at several events discussing their experience, demonstrating how individuals could move beyond conflict toward understanding and growth. Their ability to find positive outcomes from their confrontation had become an inspiring example of personal redemption and professional excellence. James's unit had prevented dozens of similar incidents at royal properties and other sensitive locations by identifying potential troublemakers early and implementing intervention strategies before situations escalated to physical confrontation. His methods, which emphasized de-escalation and clear communication, had become standard training for security personnel dealing with social media-motivated misconduct. Sarah's transformation had been so complete that many of her current colleagues and friends were unaware of her past as a controversial social media influencer. She had deliberately chosen to build her new identity around service to others, rather than personal promotion. The woman who had once craved viral attention now valued privacy and authentic relationships above digital recognition. The final chapter of their story remained unwritten, but both Sarah and James had demonstrated that viral moments, whether positive or negative, need not define entire lives. Their encounter at Buckingham Palace had become the catalyst for growth, learning, and positive change that neither could have imagined when their paths first crossed on that September afternoon. The cameras that had captured their confrontation had also documented the beginning of their transformation into better versions of themselves.